Hey everyone, Damien here for my sleepy vlog number 4. Um, let's see, it's going to be kind of a hodgepodge of different things, so I might be a bit disorganized. For one thing, I'm starting to get back to buying trades. I do think floppies are the best way to read things, but in certain cases, trades are either more economical or in some ways better. So I made my first order from In Stock Trades, which has incredible discounts and you know a huge selection. I went through a link on a comic book mom who was linking to a special deal on Batman by Design, and I was going to get that, but then I kept finding other things that I really wanted even more, and I could only spend so much money. If you spend $50, they give you free shipping, so I basically spent just $50. I don't know if a comic book mom will still get a little credit with in-stock trades for that, even though I didn't get the book that she originally linked to. I did get to them through her link, so I don't know. Hopefully someday I can get Batman by Design also. Uh, so, and if it does, give Comic Book Mom a little bit of credit, maybe when I shop with them, I'll keep going through her link, but I don't know if that does any good. You can let me know, Comic Book Mom, if you're watching this. So this time I got books 3 and 4 of Unwritten. I really love the first two collections. And this is highly economical. I think it cost me $9 a volume through In-Stock Trades. And these are, well, the first two volumes were really great. Very dense reading. So I was extremely glad to have started the Unwritten series. Kind of grown up. Certainly it would be kind of boring for a lot of younger readers, but it still kind of evokes a sense of youth and the excitement of stories. So, it may be in places like this that comic books are really, is the forefront of good mainstream comic books as opposed to the superhero comic books, although I love superheroes. And speaking of which, I now can read the next set of Daredevil. I read the first trade. I had that in paperback, but got this hardback for a very good price also. I think $11 about. I think this may only have 5 issues in it, but still incredible. Hardback for $11 or $12. Love that cover. That's going to be a classic cover, I think. So really looking forward to that. And then, for me, the ultimate thing that I really wanted, the Avengers Kree-Skrull War, which includes the very first Avengers comic book I ever read. I think Avengers 91. The one where Ant-Man goes inside the Vision to fix him. And so I have a strong love for that issue, and I have other reprints of it. I've actually never gone out and tried to find some old reader copy or something of the original. But the nice thing about this is I think it's a little oversized, and on really nice paper you can, as much as you can be nostalgic about the old comic book smell and stuff, it's when the art's really great. I think there's something really nice about when the trades or collections are really well done and beautifully reprinted on nice paper, so I can really savor the artwork. Neil Adams' artwork and some of the other artwork. It was 93. Avengers 93 was the very first comic book I ever read. I actually got this trade for one of my nephews in our big family get-together when I gave everyone a graphic novel. And when I got him this and I was looking through it, I just had to get a copy for myself. So this is the only one that, I mean, even this was quite cheap through in-stock trades. It was the only one that cost any amount of money. The other ones were so cheap. So I'm just really psyched about that. I would love more classic comics in this slightly larger size on the nice paper. So maybe I'll do a review on this whole book sometime. There's a great 2-part video by Howlermouse, kind of a nostalgia thing, or kind of a comic books now and then. And, it was a little slice in time of his reaction to reading an Avengers comic book from the 80s and an Avengers comic book from the 2000s. I think it was from the 80s, or maybe it was the late 70s. And the same thing with a Justice League, 2 Justice League books. And the past came out much better than the present time. And a lot of times there's a lot of ways in which I miss the way old comic books were done. Maybe they had too many captions and too much stuff sometimes, but now some comic books seem too flimsy in what's in there, and too few panels and the huge spreads all the time. But I go both ways, because sometimes I really like just the really cool artwork, and it seems worth paying the extra money that we now pay for the great paper and the color and the big spreads. I don't have any comic books nearby like that to look at. Let's see. But, back in the old comics, you never got anything like that, or rarely got anything like that. And this summer when I had an old friend from college visit me who likes comics but always liked underground comics and alternative comics and weird things, and I was showing him Saga, and I was showing him some of the new DC books and other stuff, and he was very impressed and excited about how some of what was kind of fringe values in comic books have been incorporated in a lot of these slick, more mainstream comic books, especially things like Saga. But there was, all kinds of other things I showed him. But they've incorporated a lot of violence, too, and a lot of sex. And my friend thought that was all for the good, because he's totally into alternative comics. And I like what he likes, but I also like a more traditional, old-fashioned thing. And my wife has been upset recently when my daughter, will be looking into my comic books and come across all these scenes of violence, and I don't blame her. So now I feel like I kind of have to hide away most of my current comics so that she won't accidentally stumble upon them. So it's kind of, a lot of the modern comics are more like what you used to just find in weird little corners, like heavy metal or something like that. Now that's much more normal. And that's good in a way, and it's bad in a way. And Howlermouse, so in his comparison, I imagine maybe I will do a comparison if I have time. I will read all of this volume of Denny O'Neil Wonder Woman, which at the time was kind of, Denny O'Neil was the hot, acclaimed writer, and they were trying to turn around Wonder Woman and do something interesting with her. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna read. This is from the library, and then I'm gonna read the trade, which is rereading of the first 6. I don't seem to have the trade right with me, but the first 6 issues of the current Wonder Woman continuity, which I know I really love. So it's kind of will be an possibly unfair comparison of this old Wonder Woman trade, or trade of old Wonder Womans, to to the new stuff and see what I think. See if I do come out saying the new is way better than the old. We'll see. I've been reading some old Jack Kirby Stan Lee Fantastic Fours to my daughter, who's 4, but she can get something out of them and I can get something out of them. And I think there's something brilliant about a book that little kids can enjoy and adults can enjoy. To me, in a way, that's the very best thing. But by the time I started reading comic books, which I'm even older than, quite a bit older than Howlermouse, although sometimes he seems as old as me. When I started reading comic books, those Jack Kirby Fantastic Fours were already, to me, kind of mythical beasts. They were probably just a few years in the past. But you couldn't get a hold of old comic books easily at all, especially if you were a kid. That I never even discovered comic book stores, if any existed at that time, until I went to New York City many years later. So the first comic book store I ever saw was when I was 15 in New York City. I'm rambling too far. My point is, even when I started reading comic books in the mid-'70s, the great stuff had already been done, which was the Jack Kirby Stan Lee Fantastic Fours. And now, reading them in a black and white collection with my daughter, they still seem really brilliant, even though there's some childish parts, and even though there's just all kinds of things that comic books don't do now, some of which they jettisoned because they were kind of silly. So one of the things I do, because if you spend a lot of time with your children, you have to find a lot of things to do with them, and you have to read a lot of books, or play a lot of pretend games, do a lot of drawing. So because I love comic books, and my daughter seems to love any comic books that I manage to put in front of her, keep searching for stuff to do. So an interesting thing for those of you, perhaps might be of interest for those of you with small kids, that I've just discovered at one of the local comic book stores, but these might be at bookstores, is DC Super Pets. I think they cost about $6 a piece. They're drawn by... I thought I had another one here. I've got 3 of them, but anyway, here's 2 of them. Barnyard Brainwash, starring Bat Cow, and Superhero Splashdown, starring Bedog. I don't know how to pronounce this Green Lantern chipmunk's name, and what's his name? Dexstar. Me and my daughter love Dexstar. And now we do lots of drawings where she draws Bedog and I draw Dexstar. I always get the job of drawing the bad guys. So these are drawn by Art Balthazar, who did the Tiny Titans. The art in them is really wonderful and charming. The stories are okay. They hired some kind of hack children's writers to do the stories, and some of them get superhero stories better than others. Like in this Green Lantern one, it's one long fight, because I guess the person who wrote it thought that's what superhero stories are about: long fights. So it's like 3 chapters of a fight. But it's still wonderful. Still a lot of fun. Probably for older kids, a good thing for them to read themselves. I don't know at what age, maybe 6 or 7, depending on how good of a reader you are. But with all these words and stuff in different colors and such, probably a good early reader book or a mid-reader book. And probably most people know about the Tiny Titans, but if you don't, they also are very good for small kids. And it's all about lots and lots and lots of superheroes. There's no major conflicts or fights with supervillains. It's just superheroes hanging out together. and you have super villains hanging out together, and it's very funny. It's better written than those Super Pets, but it's not currently in print. I guess, well, it's in trades. Trades are tricky with small kids. It's just too much. It's nice to have individual issues. Also, my daughter and I. Oh, here's the other Super Pets. This one's called Super Pet Showdown, and it's all about Proddy, this shape-shifting pet of. Is he a pet of Beast Boy? Anyway, and kind of a Justice League of Pets too. So, but back to the Tiny Titans for just a second more. The individual issues are good. If you have an iPad or some other tablet, they have a lot of them very cheaply on Comixology, and that's also a good way to read with kids because you view one panel at a time, and that helps them focus. Another one that my daughter likes is this Super Friends series, which also you can only get used, which did the Justice League based on a series of kids' toys, and it's very simple. So these are the best of the kids comic, more current kids comic. These aren't that current, but more current kids comics that I could come up with that my daughter would actually enjoy, and I'm okay with reading it to her. Other ones seem insipid or overly complicated, yet not very good for kids. But you do wonder, when you read the old Fantastic Four, why can't there be things like that for kids that are full of elements that kids love, but elements that adults love, and that in a way they're aspirational. They aspire to more rather than just give you a little bit of dialogue per page, because that's all kids can handle. They put in more and they use some bigger words, but they still are full of elements that kids relate to, and kids learn more for them. So it's my little lecturing on that. So here I am, after watching Howlermouse's video, protective of modern comics against Howlermouse's criticisms, but then attacking modern comics and wishing for more of the good old stuff. So I'd love more of the good parts of modern comics, and I'd love more comics that integrate, more of the good stuff from old comics. It seems like, from a reader's point of view, it would be great to have some of these decompressed comics, but it would be great to have more compressed comics too. I think, to a certain extent, economics, they're not only the waiting for trade kind of stuff pushes towards the decompressed comics, but the economics of maybe the writers and the artists, now that they are allowed to do that, the artists I read this in places somewhere, but never really thought about it a lot. The artists make a lot of money by selling their original art, and big splash pages and pages with big, wild action scenes, but not a lot of small panels, sell for a lot more. And I was I got the idea in my head of maybe looking into buying original art, and I was looking at some original art by Nicola Scott, who I really like right now. And some of the pages you could get for $75, and those had lots of panels on them. And then the big action shots would cost, up to $450. And I imagine for even more well-known artists than her, they get even a higher rate. So when you're thinking in the back of your head, when you're doing your art, I can get an extra $400 for this page if I make it big. That can probably mean a lot in the income of an artist over the period of a few years. So I think that may be one of the economic factors. And also, for the writers, the old writers had to come up with a whole new plot every issue, or almost every issue. And I think that's the hardest part of writing. There's other parts of writing that take a lot of skill, getting the characters just right and the dialogue and everything. But coming up with that plot is where a plot that's going to work is where a writer gets stuck. If his plot's not working, her plot's not working, then they have to start over. That's the most basic thing. So the modern writers can come up with, 2 plots a year for each individual comic book they're writing, and then spread them out. And I think that, although they still have to do work to figure out what's going to happen panel to panel and figure out the characterization and do the dialogue well, they at least don't have to worry so much about those big plots once they've got the right one. So I think that allows someone like Brian Michael Bendis or some of the other people, Matt Fraction, who write a lot of comic books, by having just a few plots that they've spread out a lot of issues, make them be able to do that. And that dovetails with the writing for trade, but I think it makes it easier. And people who are doing a new plot for every comic book, I think that's a lot more work. So it's no wonder that Stan Lee leaned on his artists to help him come up with the plots, or flesh out the plots a lot more. Let's see. I feel like this is going to be one of my boring vlogs because I haven't got my thoughts together as well as I thought I did. But another thing I wanted to mention is I looked on CBR, comic book. What's the proper name for CBR? Comic Book Resources, CBR. And they had exclusive Image Comics solicitations for November 2012. Not usually an exciting thing to look at, but Image is having... I wish I could show you my other computer screen, but I think it would be a mess trying to turn... I have 2 computer screens, but trying to turn this computer screen to face that computer screen, I don't think it would work. But... they have at least like 6 or 8 new comic books coming up, number ones coming up in November alone. Clone number 1, Great Pacific number 1, Comeback number 1, Nowhere Men number 1, Storm Dogs number 1, Perhaps Nots, Where's Jake Ellis number 1. But that's already a comic book. Witch Doctor Malpractice. So, it's kind of mind-boggling what... I think we're in the middle of a image revolution. Other people have noticed all the high quality coming up, but whoever's in charge there, and I think maybe Robert Kirkman is really involved, are just taking a lot of risks. They're putting out a lot of $2.99 comics and giving a lot of value for that, and letting a lot of creators take risks. And I'm sure there's lots of misses, but there are also lots of hits there. And I think it's going to be interesting to see going forward the effect they may have on the rest of the comic book industry. So I think this is a real exciting time for the indie comics, which I think were, when there was the big contraction after the 90s, during the 90s, with all the awful comics coming out, I think were a lot of good indie comics and a lot of people trying things out on the fringes just because they could, because so many people were buying comic books. You could, on the fringes of it, do some interesting indie stuff. And I think there's a huge contraction, but now via Image, we may be seeing a huge expansion of the indie comics. So I'm really excited for that. I guess I've gone on long enough. Hope this didn't turn out to be a super boring one. And wish I didn't even say that. I shouldn't apologize for what I'm doing. But I'll talk to you all soon, and I'll be looking for everyone's videos. So check you later.